Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, April 6, 2021. This meeting is now called to order. May we have a roll call?
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Ms. Heinrich?
Here.
Mr. Rich?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
I myself am here, and Ms. Williams.
I'm here.
All present and accounted for.
Thank you. May we now move to the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Walker, would you lead us?
My flag is back here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now move to approval of the agenda. Mr. Rich?
Thank you. I move that we approve the agenda for today's regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
Support.
A motion to approve the agenda by Mr. Rich, supported by Mrs. Smith. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. And I assume no abstentions. The motion passes. Thank you very much. We will now move to announcements. Welcome to the April 6th Farmington Board of Education regular meeting. I hope everyone enjoyed some sunshine and relaxing time during our spring break. Farmington Public Schools has a vision for high achievement for all of its students. Together with our community, we will engage every student in a quality learning experience, empowering each student to become a thoughtful, contributing citizen in a changing world. The board's priorities are fostering development of 21st century skills, assessing program impact on student achievement, fostering a positive district culture and climate that incorporates equity and inclusion, recruiting, hiring, developing, and retaining high-quality staff that reflects diversity, and ensuring equitable practices. The board has agreed on goals for the remainder of this year, and at each meeting we will remind ourselves of these goals and our progress. The first goal is with respect to board unity. The board orientation checklist has been shared with all members to ensure progress with onboarding of new members. On April 9th, this Friday, new members will participate in tours of some of our buildings and information sessions with cabinet members. The second goal is to conduct a superintendent search and create a transition plan. The next step in this process will be an interview workshop conducted by School Exec Connect on April 27th at 6 p.m. This workshop will be held virtually via WebEx, and a link for the public will be available on our website. This workshop will be recorded and available for public view on our website. We will focus on student achievement data. The board attended a data workshop on March 27th, facilitated by NWEA. It was very informative and gave board members insight into the differentiation between growth and achievement. We will review and improve community relations. To further this goal, we're interested in forming a community engagement committee, and we'll be talking about that this evening. We will proactively plan and provide timely communications on the continuity of learning plan. This topic will be on the agenda for the remainder of the school year. This evening, we look forward to hearing about plans for summer programming and fall scheduling. We will ensure district resources are aligned to priorities and goals, and to further that goal, a budget workshop is scheduled for this Saturday, April 10th at 9 a.m. It will be held virtually, and a link for the public will be made available on our website. The board continues to respond to emails. When communications are made, it is typical for the board president to serve as a spokesperson on behalf of the board rather than individual board members to respond to each email. Public comments will be shared after discussion items. This will be an opportunity to share general comments. Public comment will now be treated as in the past when meeting in person. Anyone present in the WebEx event may express a live comment. Sign-up is required, and the sign-up form is available on our website. If the public comment is intended to be critical of or express dissatisfaction with a particular staff member, student, or group, you're encouraged not to identify the person by name. You may request a private meeting with district representatives or utilize the complaint process found in our policy manual and administrative regulations manual, which provide for resolution at the complainant's closest point of origin. Generally, board members and the superintendent will not respond to public comment during the board meeting. Issues may be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, and/or response. We will now move to, that ends announcements. We will now move to items from the secretary. And I just want to acknowledge before we get to that our superintendent had another engagement and is not with us today, so she has an excused absence. We will now move to items from the secretary. Mr. Walker?
The board has received communications regarding the 2021-2022 school year, bus purchase, critical race theory, equity, COVID emails, and PYP program at Wood Creek. Communications are acknowledged, and when appropriate, a response is provided. A list of correspondence can be found in the board packet, which is available on the FPS website.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. We will now move to the legislative update, item number 4. No, that's not Mr. Rich anymore. Right, Mrs. Blau, Dr. Blau.
Yes, oh, goodness, sorry. The key information has to do with the change in the ability of boards to hold their meetings in public, and the number of people attending in terms of gathering in person has been, the restriction has been lifted. So we might want to address how we want to move forward with our meetings in terms of having the public return.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on that matter with respect to public meetings? So as I understand it, Dr. Blau, the rules for meeting in person have changed. I think they changed maybe a couple of weeks ago, whereby boards are now allowed to meet in person. That was part of our communication a couple of weeks ago, where, you know, the board made a resolution.
We were allowed to meet in person.
We made a resolution to the state and asked if we can meet in person. It was our desire to meet in person, consistent with how our student body is now meeting in person. That restriction has been lifted, and now the only way that you can meet virtually is if you are under a natural disaster that's been declared by your local county, or if you are in military service. And our board has decided that we want to continue meeting in person, but we'll meet as in a hybrid way. So because Oakland County has declared the state of emergency and has extended that, we could meet virtually. We could meet entirely virtually, but we're continuing to meet in person, and we have asked that our public not attend in person. We're attending, we're doing a hybrid of sorts because we want to minimize the amount of people that are in contact with each other. So that's how we've currently interpreted that guidance, and we've received feedback from our district attorneys on that as well.
Thank you for that clarification. I believe that if a board member medically is not able to attend, that they can still attend virtually.
I think you're right on that
You know,
one too,
if,
Dr. Blau.
for example, if I were in quarantine, that I would be able to
Right.
still
As a
participate.
point of information, that is currently allowed since we are under that state of emergency through the county and the local Farmington Hills
Awesome, thank you.
jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your update?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blau. We will now move to district updates, and I believe that we have our district update on the strategic plan, and Dr. Coffin is going to walk us through that. You'll need your headphones. Good evening, Dr. Coffin.
some of the hopefully you can hear me. Okay. This has been some of the most rewarding work that I've been able to be a part of in the last few months, and just so proud of our teachers, our teacher leaders, our administrators, and our community, and most of all, our students, for really participating and spending time with us to really help us identify where we are as a district and where they see our future as far as these goal areas. So you can see we have 8 goal areas. 3 of them really focus on looking at culture, leadership, and systems that support equity and innovation. We have our goal around teaching and learning, looking at how we manage district resources, organizational effectiveness, the community relations goal committee, and our futures committee. I wanted to just share a few highlights of some of the work we've been doing over the past month. We've really had what I would call a soft rollout for our goal areas. I think, as I mentioned before, we have about 100 community members who participate in these goal area meetings that happen usually in the evening. And so we do those virtually, and it's been great to see so many participating. We're gathering feedback from our community, really just to gather an understanding, first around what equity and innovation and what they see that. And really a gentleman asked a very good question at one of the meetings. He said, we can define these things, but how does it look for Farmington? And so this information that we are gathering is going to help us as we move forward, not just understand what we mean when we talk about equity and innovation, but really how do we operationalize it for Farmington Public Schools? And all of the goal committee areas are looking at this from a systems approach. And we've gotten really positive feedback about that, that perspective. The other wonderful development in this whole process, as I had mentioned when we first started it, is developing our leadership. So proud, as I mentioned, of our co-leaders and our co-chairs as we work together, not only to facilitate meetings, but to come together and debrief and process, and then develop what our next steps are as we continue these meetings. One of the main important highlights that I want to make sure the board is aware of is that it's providing an opportunity for voice. And I mentioned our students, our staff, and our community, they're sharing their perspectives so that we have a really clear understanding of how these goal areas will impact the future of our students and our community. And then also it's providing an opportunity for our community to learn about Farmington Public Schools. An example is our goal committee area on effective management of resources. That committee, they had a lot of questions about just some of the processes that we have, specifically around how do we allocate resources? Talk about our budget. Where does our funding come from? So at our next meeting in April, Ms. Kaminsky is going to provide a general overview and update so that everybody has an awareness of that. So it's been a nice way to educate our community as well. So all of our 8 goal committees met in March. We'll meet again in April and then again in May. And in June, at one of your Board of Education meetings, our co-leaders and our co-chairs are going to provide an update on each of the goal area committees, the work we've done so far during this first rollout, and then what our plans are moving forward for the 21-22 school year. So our profile of a lifelong learner work, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. That's part of our teaching and learning goal. We had really hoped to be able to start that work this spring, but in speaking with the facilitator today, we think it's just best to move that and launch that in September. So we will then now spend this time developing a project plan and timeline for how we will move that work forward. So again, just a brief update the board, and certainly would entertain any questions you might have.
I don't, Dr. Blau?
Ms. Heinrich and then Dr. Blau.
Are these committees going to continue to follow up in the fall after they've completed their recommendations in the spring, or are they done with that process?
Can you hear me, or I can't hear you?
We can hear you.
I can hear,
Oh, you didn't hear
hear
me?
Dr. Coffin, but I can't hear Ms. Heinrich.
It's hydrant.
Can you hear me?
Yes, 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 yes.
While we wait for that, how about we go with Dr. Blau, and then we'll try to fix your audio.
Okay.
Oh, I think we heard it. Go ahead,
So who are we?
Mrs.
Me?
Heinrich. Yep.
Oh, I just had a quick question. When these committees make the recommendations you said they're going to meet in April and May, are they done with their jobs, or are they going to continue and follow up in the fall into the next school year?
So this is really working on a 3 to 5 year plan. And so as this year has been pretty interesting, we just wanted to make sure we get people involved. And so we're learning so much from from having those voices. So no, they know they're in this. This is just getting us information to start, and then we'll develop the goals and objectives, and then they'll be with us next year, again, as long as they want for the next 3 to 5 years. Dr. Blau?
Thank you. I'm thinking that this might be a topic that would be better explored at our Academic Excellence Committee meeting, but I'm really curious to learn how we move from, once we've developed the profile of the lifelong learner, how do we utilize that information to then guide the decisions we make around curriculum and instruction and assessment? So I'd really be interested in that.
Absolutely, and the board will be part of that process. So it's a process that's facilitated with somebody who works with KnowledgeWorks. So they will come in, that we'll do some work with our leadership team in August prior to our start in September, and we will have parents and students and community and staff and everybody part of those conversations. So the board will be part of that right from the beginning.
Mr. Walker.
Dr. Coffin, just how is the work dovetailing with the equity work Dr. Goodrum is doing?
Should be wrapped up here within the next couple of weeks. Each month I have a debriefing meeting with each of the goal areas. Dr. Goodrum is part of that. We want to make sure that we're doing everything in conjunction. But as right now, we're gathering information. So that's going to be information that's going to be combined with our equity audit and then help us to move forward. There's a lot of work to do. So we're going to make sure that we're all working in the same, in the same vein, but tackling some of the issues in a different way. So yes, great question.
The equity report will be shared with the board. Is that a separate piece from what you're doing as a part of the strategic plan?
Say it's separate, but it's happening in conjunction. So that's information that they're gathering, and then they'll provide their report, and then we're going to combine that with the feedback that we're getting and some of the ideas from our community. Again, how do we operationalize the strategies? Yes.
Yep. Good evening. My question is the 100 board members, the 100 community members. Can you kind of give us an idea of how these 100 folks are actually working through this process?
So we have some that are on one, 2, or 3 different committees. These are students, these are parents, these are community members who no longer have children in our school, maybe have grandchildren in our school. So they signed up. We sent out kind of an all call to our community, and they signed up to be part of this. So we have goal committees that have anywhere from 20 to 45 people on them. And so this virtual way has been really nice, because I think we've been able to capture a lot more voice that way.
Mrs. Smith?
Good evening. Trying to get used to this. Are these the same people that are on committee?
are they, what can I say, lifelong members of the committee? Or are there different people, you know, weekly? Sorry about that.
No, great question, Mrs. Smith. So they're the same people that have signed up, but we always can bring people on, and we also recognize it's a commitment, and sometimes everybody can't make every meeting, but we keep them connected through minutes and information that was shared at the meeting. Yes.
And
Yeah.
they are constantly being put in the loop, even if they don't, even if they miss, so they're not behind and not know.
Many of our goal committees have asked for homework, so they actually participate in homework as well and get the notes that everybody else shares as well. So yes, great question.
And piggybacking off of that question, will there be an opportunity for onboarding for new members of the community who would like to take part in this after they see a role for themselves?
Absolutely. So we'll have a relaunch in the fall and just kind of hit the ground running with the information that we have right now. And certainly anybody's able to join now if they would like to do that. They can contact me, and I'm happy to connect them with a committee that might be of interest to them. Absolutely.
Are there any more questions? Hearing none, we will thank you, Dr. Coffin, for that update. We will now move to item 6 on our agenda, which is reports from board committees. We have one from the Policy Committee. Mr. Rich.
Thank you. The Policy and Board Governance Committee met on March 24th. That was myself, Ms. Fox, and Ms. Smith. Also present were Dr. Goodrum, Kevin Sutton from Miller Johnson, as well as Ms. Buckley. And so we went over a few different things. First was what have been called the equity statements. So those are goals that can be found on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion website page. And so those are really our goals for our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And so how we are forming policy has been discussed as to what is going to be used once we get results from our equity audits, that we can beef up more our current policy 3010, which was agreed that it could be more robust moving forward. We also discussed with the policy service provider, just getting us an overview from Mr. Sutton as to what Miller Johnson does for the district and what their role is in helping us update our policies, make sure that we stay current and are following the law. The other thing that we did was look over what the board's role in policy creation and review is. And so it's really the board that creates policy. When we had the workshop, that is one of the main roles of the board. And so it's really when we decide what we want, that's what goes into the policy manual. And then when we give it to the district to figure out how it's going to happen, that's what ends up in the administrative regulations manual most of the time. And then we also discussed a few other items, but also looking at what's coming up in the future, including getting a list as to certain district policies, which we will then be able to add to future agendas moving forward. And then I know, Ms. Weems, you might have something that we should be adding, but also have a discussion
Sure.
as a whole board.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rich. So one of the items I spoke to the policy chair, Mr. Rich, on was around board protocols. So board protocols are generally the operating guidelines around how the board itself should function. So in addition to the policy around how the school and the district should be functioning, how does the board function within ourselves? How do we develop policy? How do we go about developing meetings? How do we go about setting the agenda? All of those sorts of things. We do have a bit of that already in our policy. We have a couple of pages within our document on board policy, but what we noticed a few years ago was that there were still some things that were not real clear and crisp in terms of how we develop the agenda, or which meetings are televised, which meetings are not televised, all of those sorts of things. So the policy committee a couple of years ago spent a fair amount of time putting together some board protocols. I think we got them in pretty good shape, but they never quite got approved. And so what I asked Mr. Rich about was whether we should dust those off, whether the board was interested in having that discussion again, and if so, whether that should be on the policy committee's agenda going forward. We would leave it to the policy committee to determine its priority amongst a bunch of other items that the policy committee is handling right now. But I think it's important, especially as a new board, to agree on how we're going to function together. Usually that's something that we would do within the first 6 months of becoming a new board. We do have a lot of things going on at the moment. And so, I'll leave it to the policy committee to make that decision or recommendation. I'm seeing nods, though, that folks are interested in developing protocols. There are a couple of ways to do this. One is to do that as a committee of the whole, which I would usually recommend for a new board so that everybody can have some input into it. Or we can do it as part of committee work. And given the amount of balls that are in the air right now, that's usually a good way to get more done, is to assign things to a committee. Would need the board to kind of give some direction as to where you guys are headed there. And I'll move on to the next topic before I get feedback on that. The other piece, though, is the timing. Again, there's a lot of things going on right now, so there may not be time to schedule a workshop, to handle that, given the number of meetings we have between now and June. And then the other thing is we've got, hopefully a new superintendent that will be coming on in June. We may want to wait and engage in that conversation once we have a superintendent. So I think the first thing I kind of wanted to get some consensus on was the timing. Are folks interested in doing this? I'm sort of saying yes. Are we saying that we want to wait until we get a new superintendent, or is it important enough to do, that now?
I have a,
Yep, Mrs. Heinrich and then Mrs. Fox.
Something like that, I would like to see the whole board develop protocols as a committee of the whole rather than send it to committee, but I agree with you on the timing. I think that we need to prioritize our superintendent search, and we have those meetings scheduled in May, and then look into scheduling and working with that moving forward once we get through the superintendent piece of our process.
Thank you, Mrs. Heinrich. Mrs. Fox, and then Mrs. Smith, and then Mr. Walker.
so I remember reading from you, Mrs. Weems, the protocols, and they are quite thorough. I think as a committee, it would be something that we could actually flush out and then bring it to the whole board for discussion. And waiting until June, I think, would be, or until a new superintendent comes in, along with the equity audit, would all go together later on during the school year.
So just to summarize what you're saying that the documents appear to be in good order. You think the committee could take a look and present something to the board, but you're saying that that presentation would happen later?
We can, yes.
Okay.
We can move until June, July.
Okay.
Whenever the equity piece is done, along with, whatever else that we're doing.
Okay.
So I think that we're going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Smith?
I would like to piggyback off of what our colleagues are saying. Mr. Rich has done a phenomenal job at setting up these meetings to keep, because it's very important that we do have 4 new board members. So with Mr. Rich's leadership, what he has done is made sure that we do have our new board members involved and know what's going on and who we need to, if need be, talk to Mr. Sutton, or better yet, get the information feedback from our new board members. I too agree that we should wait. We have several plates in front of us at this buffet table that we all just can't eat from right now. But with Mr. Rich and his leadership, it's not like we're all hanging out here with nothing, he's not leaving us at the buffet table with no plates and just food. You see what I'm saying? So I agree with our colleagues saying, allow him to continue to have the meetings, and if there's questions that board members may have that are new, he can, flush that out and then wait for us to hire a new superintendent to come in and let them be a part of that process too. Because we don't know who we're going to take. And with that new person coming in, it would be like redoing it all over again. So, and I appreciate all what Mr. Rich has done, because I've sat on policy for a while, and he's doing a great job by working with us by getting this done. So I totally agree with what, Ms. Henrich and Ms. Fox is saying. Let's just pump the brakes, because we got a lot of stuff on these tables that we just can't take in all at once.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Walker.
First, I'd like to say thank you to you and to Mr. Rich and those who put the work of policy together several years ago to bring us to this particular place and point. And if I'm understanding everybody correctly, I would want the policy committee to continue to examine that information, continue to flush that information out. Based on some of the things I was in a position to examine, some of our policy is very board-specific, and some of it lends itself more to communications and interactions with the superintendent. To me, it would make sense, and it sounds like we're heading in this direction. That information we would hold off and reserve for when our new superintendent comes on board, and we can pick up with that information at that time, and then continue development in that vein. I would definitely be in agreement for that kind of direction, but I want to make sure that we are moving forward with policy work, because as a new board member, having that structure brings a level of confidence to the work that we're trying to do. I'm at least speaking for myself. Having that structure would bring an additional level of confidence to the work that is being done here and presenting ourselves appropriately to our community.
Dr. Blau. I concur with all of what our fellow board members have shared. And I have a quick question. When we had our session together with Mr. Morrell from MASB, it came to light that we might benefit as a board from doing some work together around our own vision, coming up with our own common vision for the district, as well as, he called them board operating procedures. Is that the same as
Yes.
policies? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Rich.
Sure. I guess I can wrap it up with this. I hear what everyone is saying on all of this, and agree that I think, and we've discussed holding off on, especially our interactions with cabinet protocols and things like that with our superintendent until we have a new superintendent in place. I definitely think that the policy committee can continue to flush out some of the protocols we have listed. It's hard to think about that we did this work a few years ago because, time shifts. I definitely see us moving forward with this, especially something substantial to approve during the summer months when we have more time and are able to discuss this with our new superintendent. But I do want to make absolutely clear, if anyone has any questions about policies, procedures, board protocols, anything like that, feel free to talk to me, ask me questions. If you have comments on things, please feel free to share those. Those are greatly welcomed.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. So having heard from everyone, what I'm hearing is people are interested in moving this work forward. There may be some elements that maybe the policy committee could look at right now that were less directly influenced by, the district, right? So perhaps the committee could dust those off and look at them, but that we would hold off until post-June to have some sort of workshop to review these together, to collaborate on these together, and to also conduct some of the visioning exercise. So that's what I'm hearing from the board. That's the consensus. Mrs. Smith.
And for the record, for the community, we will not be deliberating. There will be no Open Meetings Violation Act. But we do have a new board. And having that being said, a workshop with Mr. Rich and the rest of this board would be very important for everyone to have all of this information at the same time. So there will be no deliberation, there will be no, Open Meetings Violation Act. It will be solely Mr. Rich working with his committee and the rest of our colleagues to make sure that everyone is on the same page, because right now we have a very cohesive board. And I like where we're going, and this will take us a little step further. So again, I thank you, Mr. Rich, and I thank you, Ms. Weems, for getting this together and working with us all on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we're ready to move on to our next agenda item, which are discussion items. And I think I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Kaufman. You will need your earphones as we go through the instructional delivery plan.
I'm going to turn it over first here to Ms. Hendrickson. As was shared earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about our summer school planning, where we're at this point, and then also the planning and where we're at for the fall.
Hi, Farmington Board of Education. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. I'm using a new set of earphones, so just wanted to make sure I was good. Okay, so we are, each summer, we continue our learning with our students, supported by our teachers. This summer is no different in that respect, except that we are actually growing our summer programming at both the elementary and the secondary level. So when we think about elementary, we did communicate with the board in an update last week around what we'd be offering at the elementary as well as the secondary level. I did create a PowerPoint so that the community who is hearing us today could see some of the visualization of the information that you were already provided. When we began working on the elementary plan, we wanted to make sure we had some opportunities available for all students, as well as some opportunities available to targeted groups of students. So we wanted to make sure there were enrichment as well as intervention opportunities. And we were able to come up with a plan that honors both of those, as well as integrates adaptive technology programs that we currently use in the school district to help create a continuity from what we're doing during the year over through the summer. And we want to also be sure that we are meeting the needs of our community by making sure there are remote and in-person opportunities, as well as some like those in-person that are more structured, as well as some more self-paced opportunities for all families, depending on what their needs are. We also know that we might have families that are more interested in certain support this summer, and so we are working on tuition-free or very low-cost options for our families, and we're continuing to hash out those details. At the elementary level, all of our K-5 students will have access to continued learning through the summer through the use of Dreambox and Lexia. Students will not have to stop using that program they're already using, but in addition to Dreambox and Lexia, we're going to provide like a model schedule for a family of what some summer experiences could look like, and we're going to provide them other sample activities they can do with their students through the summer. So all students will have access to kind of a self-paced program that they can support their students with. But we also have some more structured opportunities. One is our continued work with our Camp Read program, which was originally a K2 program. It's a reading intervention program that's a half-day, multi-week program. We've actually expanded that to K5 so that we can meet a larger number of our learners. Last summer, we had already expanded to K5, and we're going to continue that work and increase the number of students we are servicing through Camp Read. We also have already existing in our programming an English language learner program called Class, which again is a multi-week series that is half day, that we have a large number of our EL teachers that support, and that is very targeted to that population of students. Dr. McDougall has been working with her team to extend recovery services to our self-contained specialty programs this summer, which will be supported by many of our amazing special ed staff. We also note that many of our families have engaged in our camp enrichment experiences over the summer, which are your normal camp-like pieces. But what we've done is we've infused STEM through the whole program through Camp Invention. We've added literacy and math enrichment throughout the program, as well as those camp-like program offerings families might be used to, so that we're ensuring that we're meeting a broad range of students with continued literacy and math support, as well as opportunities to be engaged differently in outdoors and through STEM and more innovative activities, so that we can keep brains growing as we get ready for launching the school year. We obviously also have prior community-based offerings that we will continue to partner with this summer that we've traditionally had. At our secondary level, we've actually probably expanded quite a bit compared to our prior year's offerings. We want to provide more varied opportunities that were remote and in person, as well as had an innovative component, as well as ensuring that we're continuing to offer tuition-free to low-cost offerings for all of our students. So what's new this summer is we will be offering a middle school innovation lab, which we're going to have an interdisciplinary group of teachers who are going to lead STEM project-based learning opportunities for our middle school students to explore their passions and interests this summer. So we're very excited to have that coming about this summer for the first time. We usually always have offered a secondary credit recovery option through Edgenuity with staff support. We're going to continue that work this summer, and then we're also going to be offering, as we have in the past, some credit advancement through online coursework. But in addition to that credit recovery and credit advancement that we're offering, we have access to booster courses. So any student in grades 6 through 12 who would like to take a summer course in math and or ELA, and what it is, it's a booster class. So I come in as going to be a as a 7th grader. I just came out of 6th grade math, but you know what? I want to reconnect with some of those concepts I already learned this year to continue to solidify those. I can take this booster class, and that'll help solidify and extend my learning from 6th grade as I go into 7th grade. So for families that are concerned that their students might want some additional instruction on concepts they've already been exposed to, they will have access to that for free. So that was an expansion, but we wanted to make sure that we had in-person opportunities. So with the credit recovery, credit advancement, and these booster classes, they are online, but we're going to have in-person learning labs where students can come in, have space and structure to help engage in those courses and have in-person supports by our staff. So we're very excited to expand that opportunity 6-12 for not just our credit recovery, but also students that just need to refresh and reinforce what they learned this last school year as they start the coming year. We're also adding into our repertoire these what we call transitional programming. This is still under development. The specifics are not quite as detailed yet, but we're going to be offering 5th graders that are going to be 6th graders, 8th graders that are going to be 9th graders, specific transition programming to help them move from their elementary to middle school and middle school, high school. And there'll be some focus on math and literacy supports for them, as well as some social, emotional, et cetera. We're still dividing that out because we're working with teachers on developing those programs as they are new. Lastly, but not least, we're continuing to offer special ed recovery services for our specialty programs through the summer months as well. And that's a quick but kind of comprehensive view of our expanded programming for summer.
Thank you. Headphones, my goodness. 2 questions. One, with respect to our summer school offerings, heaven forbid, but we are hearing information about the double mutant variant and so forth. And should we get to a place where we need to move to full remote learning, are we positioned to be able to switch to that so that the learning is as uninterrupted as possible during the summertime?
We're I'll give you an example. Class and Camp Read were offered last summer virtually. So we can offer the in-person version and move to a remote option as needed for students. And we have experience doing the remote version of these programs last year. We're going to have remote versions now for those that want it, and we're going to have in-person for those that aren't, but we will work to have a transition. And we're using all the same types of programs, and we can have the same access to delivering that. So we are going to have to be prepared to pivot as needed. Some of the camp-like programs that are more of those experiential pieces, we're going to have to think about those depending. We didn't offer those last year because of the pandemic, so we'll be thinking through some of those pieces. Now that we know what the structure and the courses are looking like, we can plan for that as best we can. Good question. Knowing that.
My second question is, some of the offerings are at low cost. Do we know what those offerings are? And is there a way for us to investigate through CARES Act or some other one-time funding, a way that all of our offerings can be free to our community, especially given the times that we're in?
Yes. So when we went into the planning process, our intent is to have a tuition-free summer experiences. Now, an example of credit advancement that isn't really in response to the pandemic where a student might need credit recovery, there might be a tuition fee, but not as high as we would have historically put into place. Things like Camp Read are already free options. Class is already a free option. The K-12, K-5 option is free for all students. So most everything is, we are using actually grant dollars. They're called II.B. And we get funding specifically for our summer programming through grants to help fund. And so right now we're in the process of that application and calculating that. So that funding will help us identify what the offset is. We think we're going to be in a pretty good place. Right now, I just like to say that low cost because we're still in the financials, but it is our intent to not impact families. And if we do, very low cost.
Mrs. Fox and then Mrs. Smith.
So I'm very pleased to see that we'll be doing credit advancement in the summertime for our middle schools and especially our high school students. Can you tell me the number of advanced placement courses that you will have available for summer?
Ingenuity is we're contracting with to provide the curriculum. And so we have a large number of varied courses within that catalog. And so we haven't defined which courses would be used for credit advancement or not. Based on where our planning is from the knowledge I have, I always can touch base with Curtis Lovio if my information is incorrect. But we have had students doing credit advancement in the past through Edgenuity. I don't know, I can't tell you how widespread it's been, but we'll be sure to be marketing that this summer as well.
Mrs. Smith and then Mrs. Heinrich.
Thank you both for doing this. And for the past few years, we have had some phenomenal staff that has done this. So, you know, they've paved the way, you know, Curtis Lovio, Keisha, Shantae Wilson, because most of this, what people don't realize is this was her baby, you know, and so you guys are just pushing that baby in that stroller for her now, and you're adding more to the program. But I want to say I thank you for continuing the work that these members of the staff have put together. And I would really like to see you encourage parents to do this because a lot of students have lost a lot of time. And we do need them to get where they need to be. I mean, this whole country with students are suffering, but to do this, and then let's make sure we have a plan that if this happens where we do have to shut down, our babies will have somewhere to go and what to do. And again, thank you for all of you working with a team effort with you know, Ms. Shante Wilson and Mr. Luvio and everybody else that has done this summer school program, so thank you.
I do appreciate you bringing that up because I was remiss to say, when we labeled it growing our summer programming, a lot of these services we have provided and we're augmenting. And we have continued connection with Curtis Lovio, oversees this. And we didn't bring him tonight because we want him to focus on some things he's focusing on in his building right now. But all of those teacher leaders that support and supervise all the teachers that help to define the program, we have put out a call to a lot of our staff to support. Obviously, staff capacity impacts the number of students that we can support. And we have been very excited by the staff members that have come out that haven't historically come out, for example, for our middle school innovation, because one of the things that Kelly kind of said from the beginning, we want to do summer programming our teachers want to engage in, that are exciting for them to be innovative. So we're trying to build a future of where we want to go with our programming long term, while also keeping that same capacity and success that like Camp Read and all of those programs have provided us historically. So we have a lot of thanks to the groups that are actually meeting repeatedly to prep what you just saw. So thank you.
Mrs. Heinrich.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank my colleagues for their questions. You answered some of them, and you kind of addressed staffing, because that was my question. Are you getting enough staff? Do you anticipate having enough staff to offer these programs within the district?
For that question, to add on. So we started, I'm trying to remember, Dr. Coffin, when that posting went out prior to break. So right now we're collecting those names. So I don't have a full update as to where we are based on each program. I do know that we're still actively recruiting. We're still trying to get more people because we need more than traditional. So some of our traditional people have launched into it. We're trying to get some above that because we want to expand programming. So it's something we are looking at. We have also had student supports often in our camp enrichment program. We do also have our contracted edu staff that have supported us in the past. So we're reaching out to them. So Curtis Lovio is actively recruiting with HR to support the capacity for the program.
Okay, and then as far as dates, do you have target dates for when our families can look for a call for registration? And then is registration, will people be comfortable knowing that they can get themselves in, or is it going to be competitive? Will you be limiting the number of students?
Trying to build for some estimated enrollments, and we've been trying to build towards larger estimated enrollments than what we've done in the past, so that we can try to make sure that everyone can participate. We are a little bit, I'd say 3 or 4 weeks behind where we would normally be communicating and getting out information. Curtis Lovio is working with Diane Bauman's group to get out all of the flyer communication pieces as we solidify this. I do know that some of our programs are invite only, like our Camp Invention. And so, not Camp Invention, sorry, Camp Read. So some people are going to be getting direct invites in the next few weeks, actually, for some of our EL and intervention programming. And then I will let you know as soon as I know kind of when we're launching to the full community with the breadth of offerings.
And Claudia,
Question then.
we are trying to simplify the process and just have one application.
Yeah.
Because families may select multiple camps even during the day or throughout the summer season. So we want to make it streamlined and easy for them. And as Margaret said, so we will roll these out to those that so for some of those targeted programs, and then open them up to others. Our intent is to serve every child who wants to have a summer learning opportunity. And so we're kind of, as Margaret said, continuing to recruit. I talked to Curtis today. He's feeling pretty good about where we are. He's talking to teachers. So we're going to keep doing that because we do want to meet the needs. So we have kind of this multifaceted approach, but from a family side, one application, be able to choose several options throughout the summer.
in the scheduling for the parents. So rather than committing to the whole summer, can parents say, oh, we can opt in for weeks 2, 3, 5, and 7, but we have, things scheduled for weeks 4 and 6. So are you offering those options? And also for the in-person programs, are you partnering with the VI.A. again for extended care? And is there any resources available to subsidize that also?
So as part of our camp enrichment, we do have before and after care as a part of that, and so we will be able to fund that. The timeline, so something like Camp Read, we're going to have multiple sessions. So there might be one 2 to 3 week session and another 2 to 3 week session, and people could choose which one. Camp Enrichment, you can actually sign up by weeks, like you had kind of said, in terms of when you want to participate. So is a lot of flexibility. The only programs that are actively 8 weeks in length, for example, would be like Edgenuity. Those courses are designed to be 6 to 8 weeks. Some kids might accelerate through those faster than others, but those are the only things defined as 8 weeks. The special ed recovery work that Dr. McDougall is doing, I think she's planning on that being 5 to 6 weeks for that programming. So we're going to be as flexible as we can so that parents can participate.
I just wanted to thank you all for the extremely hard work that you have all done. Mr. Lovio and his crew, the teachers who are stepping up to participate in this. It's incredible the number of different kinds of offerings that are in development right now, and I just thank you and hats off. Boy, you can really change the tires on the car while it's careening down the highway, can't you? Amazing. So bravo, and looking forward to all these wonderful opportunities for our community.
We appreciate academic excellence as we talked with you about summer programming, and that help us continue to refine and make sure we are thinking about all the pieces necessary.
Mrs. Fox.
So I too think you all are doing an exemplary job. I am a little curious about the funding. I know that the governor recently passed the HB Bill 4048. Are you using some of that funding for summer school?
So I am not as learned in the codes. I know that we're using 23B application funds, so I don't know if Jennifer can comment about if it's the same thing or not.
Oh, Mrs. Fox, that is just a wonderful question. Right now, we spent 3 hours or 2.5 hours today walking through all of our funding sources to make sure that we can make the best use of all the dollars coming in. Mm-hmm. So we just found out that we qualify for those 23B funds, and the deadline is April 15th. So we have been really working to try to make sure that we're using everything to the best, in the best way. So we do have plenty of funds to cover what we just shared, and if we end up expanding, I think we're in a really good spot for that.
Mm-hmm. Follow-up to that is
yeah, Jennifer, maybe you have a better response to that. We've had some of our funds, some of these federal dollars expire sooner rather than later, so we need to make sure we're using them and not giving, making sure we capitalize on those for our students. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I was just concerned about in terms of credit recovery and the cost, and I know the HB 4048 provides $500 per student for credit recovery. Will that be used?
That's the 23B funds, and so we are given a per pupil allocation to our projected enrollment, and $550 per individual is the rate.
So students who need, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mabel.
For the summer, will they be able to get that at no cost?
Yeah, so we think that all the Edgenuity credit recovery will be no cost. The only thing that might be cost from the Edgenuity would be the credit advancement components. That money is kind of targeted for remediation. Most of all of our other programs is either literacy or math enrichment, STEM opportunity can be covered, the middle school innovation can be covered, so the Camp Read can be covered. Actually, class is covered partially out of Title $3. We do have some Title I funding that helps. So we are going to be at a place where there shouldn't be costs for students, particularly the edgenuity pieces and any of the intervention.
With families, if for whatever
Yes.
reason they were unable, we would make sure we work with them. We don't want anybody to be turned away for any reason that would be financial.
Thank you both for walking us through this. I know that the summer plans were a pretty significant area of concern for board members. And so we appreciate the work that you've done in here. I particularly appreciate both the acceleration and remediation that I see in here, and also love the transitional supports. I think that's very important. Thank you for that again. I think we are ready to move on to our next agenda topic, which is the Community Engagement Committee. And Dr. Blau is going to lead us in a discussion there.
Yes. Sorry. We are interested in as a board, in creating opportunities to better foster relationships between the 7 of us and the members of our community who would be interested in dialoguing with us. Right now, really the only vehicle that we have, especially during COVID, for interacting with the community is through public comment or email. And I would love to have the opportunity to meet members of our community in person and get to know them as people and not just a name on an email or a voice during public comment, so that we can really engage in richer dialogue with members of our community. When it's not COVID, that might look like what Mrs. Smith, what you had been doing previously, the Saturday coffees. I'm thinking informal types of opportunities to get together. It could even be opportunities like having a potluck together, or something of that nature, where it's an opportunity for just meeting and getting to know one another, and not necessarily discussing district matters, but just an opportunity to get to know one another as human beings. So that's my vision for what I was thinking about our Community Engagement Committee working on, would be creating those opportunities. I know that when it's not COVID, we're out and about in the community a bit more at basketball games and swim meets and seeing the student plays. So, but because it is this time of COVID, that's significantly limited our opportunities to engage in person to 0. So especially going forward, as hopefully throughout the summer, if cases begin to go down and the number of people vaccinated hopefully begins to go up, then even as early as this summer, we might be able to do some things like this. Even if we can't get a booth at the farmers market on Saturdays, maybe we could have a table in the grassy area of Riley Park, and whichever of us are available could come up for an hour or two on a Saturday with our coffee or tea or whatever, and get some Petey's Donuts and hang out together and be there to interact with whoever might have questions or concerns, or just want to get to know us. So what are your thoughts on this?
Mrs. Smith.
I think that Dr. Blau is on the right page.
Thank you.
From the time I started on this board, I wanted to be transparent. And I wanted this community to know that I as a parent and a member of this board, wanted to hear their dialogue and their concerns. So many of your members of the community can be intimidated by board members and intimidated by appearing at meetings, and some don't want to be a part of public comment. Being a part of the coffee and conversations when I hosted those, you didn't have to worry about people doing the public comment because most of those comments that they had were addressed at the coffee and conversation. Did I solve everything? No, but those conversations would go back to the superintendent. He would reach out and speak to those individuals. And those that did come to public comment that would go and say, hey, no one's listening, I would raise my hand and say, I have that on Saturdays. So I applaud you for wanting to do this. I still would like to, with the blessings of our board president and the rest of our colleagues, to continue that. I agree that we should do, I mean, if it's nothing but we just sit out somewhere and listen, because we do have a lot. And our board president answers over 400 emails, and she does it by herself. We do need to, now does that mean that I'm gonna give up a Saturday to be bashed by community members? No. But it does mean that I will sit and I will listen. Now, I don't know about no potluck. Because I need a meal like I need a hole in the bed. I got COVID weight. But I do think we can sit down and have a meeting, and a meeting of the minds, and let this community see that they can trust this board. They have great leadership, and that we do care and we do listen, and that we as one can't do it all by ourselves. We are we're only one of 7. So don't think that, you know, when we sit down and talk to you, that it's going to be changed. So I do agree with Dr. Blau. I don't like being Robin and riding with Batman, but I will work with you and help you with this, and we can move forward. We do need to address our community, and they do need to hear from us. And I feel their frustration. Unfortunately, that was yanked from me. But it's very important that this community hears from this board. We're all invested in here. So, Dr. Blau, you can reach out, and, well, we do that anyway. But we can have those communications because we do have a very cohesive board, and we all talk, and we try to find solutions. And I think that we need to help our board president take on some of this that she has taken on with these 400 emails. So if we get out there, and maybe somebody can buy a couple of donuts for somebody over here, we could do this, because we're all in this together. So thank you for taking this on, and thank you, Ms. Weems.
Thank you both. I'm really excited about this. Mr. Walker.
I think it's an absolutely fantastic set of ideas that you have there, and I'm very much eager to participate and support any way I possibly can. I would also like to just toss out the idea or suggestion that the coffee and conversations could possibly be virtual between now and whatever time that we go forth and can be more secure in a more face-to-face scenario. When I was running, I called myself doing something of that nature, where I was putting myself out there virtually in many town halls, if you will, and allowing people to ask their questions of me as a candidate. And I think that it's not the whole pie, but it's certainly a step in the right direction of making ourselves as accessible to our community as possible. I believe I mentioned that with Ms. Smith when I first came on board. And I think that we could do it in such a way that would be very similar to the design of the coffee and conversations, where information could still be recorded based on questions that our community asks, and then that could be brought back to our board president or our superintendent, and that information could be funneled, and we could be proactive in dealing with the thoughts and concerns of our community. Again, knowing that we can't do everything, we can't answer everybody and make everybody happy, but we can certainly listen. And I think that's one of the biggest priorities in terms of our activity as a board, that we should have and continue to have a willingness to listen, to understand with our community. And everything that you suggested points us in that direction, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blau, for bringing this to discussion and putting it on the agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I know that a good chunk of this community engagement was your baby to begin with, and I appreciate that you're...
I think I'm still carrying it, too.
I appreciate that you're all working together to bring this to fruition. I think that people are really wanting a desire to engage more than just in written form or public comment. Mrs. Fox.
I just want to say thank you as well, Cheryl. For me, this is a humanitarian opportunity for each one of us to let people know that we are here, we're mothers, we're fathers, they're mothers and fathers and community leaders. And when I campaigned on transparency, I campaigned on humanitarian, and I think this would be a great first start.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So what is this next step?
Okay, so Dr. Blau, I think that we need to form a committee. I think that we have at least 2 members who want to join the committee. And I think that
Maybe make it 3.
Mr.
I
Walker
definitely would like to be on it.
and Mrs. Smith,
Mrs. Fox.
I think those were the committee members.
Mrs.
I
Fox
think we
as
can
well.
only have 3.
That's okay, I'll step in.
Okay.
But I think all that means is that you guys will be the ones sort of meeting and bringing things to the board and being the liaison and the communicators. I think I'm hearing that all board members want to be engaged and involved in, conversations and potentially, virtual events. So what that means is that you guys will be the leaders, and you'll inform us of what the plan is, and you'll listen, obviously.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan. Mrs. Heinrich?
So if they have a community event, then we can't all participate. If we're there to, just as a role as a listener, we can come and support it even though we're not on the committee?
Absolutely, and I
Okay.
think part of what we'll need to do is, as part of our board protocols, we'll probably need to make sure that we outline what those things look like, how do we maintain sort of a two-way dialogue, but be more on the listening side rather than the talking side, because we definitely want to make sure that we're in accordance with all of our rules. That might be a
right.
first order of business for the committee.
Forgive me, what was the question? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry. Or what did Ms. Heinrich say?
Will we all be able to participate?
Oh, okay. Just that simple. Okay,
Right.
thank you. I couldn't hear.
Mr. Rich and then Mrs. Smith.
Yeah, it was just a follow-up to what Ms. Weems said. We would all be able to participate, but for a physical committee meeting of the Community Engagement Committee, it could only be the 3 people in that committee meeting. However, the product or the events or whatever is put on by the committee could be more of us.
Mrs. Smith?
Absolutely. Just to let the people know the history, because I do come with receipts. When I started this, I was new to the board, as I stated, and I did have a lot of positive feedback from Ms. Weems. I would hold it at the coffee shops, and if I didn't know anything, Ms. Weems would, I know the community, but Ms. Weems knew the board, and she knew board policy, and she knew what answers to give without breaking anything. So again, I'm going to stress to this community, this board can sit, we've done this in the past, and this was even before our time. We can take part in anything We just can't make deliberations and make decisions. So don't think that we don't know, because we do take classes and we do know our rights and we know what we can and what we cannot do. And so with that being said, Mrs. Weems and I have sat down together to discuss, to have a little get together with our board, with Mr. Rich, because we're seasoned, to let the board members know the do's and don'ts. So there will be no deliberation. Dr. Blau and myself and Mr. Walker will take, and I'm going to step back and let them do what they need to do. But as a seasoned board member, I am going to be there to help. But it's not like any of us cannot participate. But it's not like all 7 are going to be there and it's a quiet meeting, because I already hear that now. Someone coming in, and what I'm not going to do is allow my colleagues to take that hit when they're not doing anything wrong. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I think we're in a position to close this discussion item, but I would like for central office staff, Dr. Coffin and Dr. Hendricks, to pick up the line again. We would like to move back just a minute to the instructional delivery plan. We spoke a bit about the summer programming, but we didn't quite get to the fall, and if you could just give us a brief recap of that, and then also in anticipation of our vote for the next meeting, if you could just help us understand what's going on with our delivery plan for right now. I think some of our board members may have some questions.
Ms. Weems, absolutely. So briefly, our fall planning is well underway. At the elementary and at the secondary level, we've asked our families to make a selection by April 12th to let us know if they're considering a remote option. If our families want in-person, they don't need to do anything. We know that. We'll schedule them as in-person. At our elementary, we just have the remote with a Farmington teacher. At the secondary level, we have the remote with Farmington teachers, and we also have the virtual learning path. And so you might remember that was something that we had started even looking into prior to COVID. And we've had some great success with some of our families. So that's more a self-paced, working through Ingenuity as our primary provider. And so we want to make sure we keep that option for our families. We're not required to have a virtual option as a district, but we also recognize that this remote and virtual learning has really met the needs of a lot of our learners. So we want to make sure that we have that option available. Currently, if our students wanted a virtual path, they went through Oakland schools in what's called VI.A. And so we spend a significant amount of money paying for our students to go there. So we would like to invite them back and to take part in our remote and virtual learning paths now that we have those up and running. At the elementary, once they get that information, they'll start their scheduling process as normal, looking at class assignments and grade assignments. At the secondary level, when we have that information, we will start building our schedule. We use the scheduling system to be able to do that. At each of our buildings, middle school and high school, we have scheduling teams, and our counselors are working side by side with our administrators and our administrative lead on those scheduling teams. So we are right on track. We have a timeline that's been set up. It's a pretty aggressive timeline because our goal is that each student and staff member knows what their schedule is when they leave in June. In the past, that hasn't been the case. So sometimes, most of the times, students did not know what their classes were until they came back and checked in August. And that was late, and it caused a lot of stress and anxiety, not only on people, but on our system. So Mrs. Smith and her department and myself and the secondary leaders have been working together, and that is our commitment, so that we have all of that information there. We're starting with a brand new schedule. So I know there was a little bit of confusion this year as we were trying to rebuild the second semester. And what has happened in the past is we traditionally have rolled over our schedule, and that's been okay. But now, because we're offering multiple options for instructional delivery, we're going to start fresh, and we're going to make sure that we have a much smoother transition into the fall. than what we did this year. And not all of it was, the pandemic played a huge part of that, but we also made adjustments to ensure that we didn't continue some of those pieces of our system that just weren't working for our students. Any question? Yeah, Mrs. Heinrich, yes.
Yes, of course. When you were talking about the virtual learning path and the teachers, teaching virtually is very different, we have learned this year, than teaching in person. Are we building any staff that are specializing and dedicated to virtual learning and growing their skills through professional development? And do we have resources so that we will have enough staff that are dedicated to our virtual students without having to have the challenges that we've had this year as far as, who's going to teach virtual, who's going to teach in person, and going back and forth? And so are those things being looked into, and do we have the resources to support that?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, absolutely. And so in looking at the schedule, as I said, we're going to, in early May, we'll be meeting with HR, and we will determine all the staffing, because by then we will know who is on that remote path. We talk about our virtual learning students, we just pull them out because they are going to be self-paced, and they do that work. But for our remote students and then our in-person students, this year what we had to do some teachers were teaching both, some teachers were streaming. So we want to avoid that as much as possible, but we also have really built capacity in our teaching staff, and we have continuous professional development, improvement, and opportunities for them to learn and grow. Also, we've provided the technology, as we've learned a lot more about the technology that we need in the classroom. So we do have that. We continue to purchase technology as our teachers become more comfortable teaching in a remote environment. But our plan is that we will have students who can be, so at the elementary, they will be fully remote with their own teacher. At the secondary, right now, that's why, and I understand families, it's hard to try to make a decision right now to decide what you want to do in the fall. But from our perspective, it's April 12th, and we need to have these schedules done by the middle of June. So we really do need to have at least that preliminary information to be able to start to build the schedule, especially at the secondary and especially at the high school. That's our biggest challenge right now, is we need that information.
And I would add on, Dr. Kaufman, is we've been talking about funding sources to support the summer planning. We have been budgeting and planning to support the remote teachers in this learning environment at the elementary and secondary levels, so that if we need to provide additional materials and resources and time for them to plan and coordinate, so that they can take their learnings from this year and enhance and deepen that in their intentional planning for the coming year. So that's an active part of our budgeting process right now, is to make sure that we're continuing to support those remote teachers as they enhance that work from this year.
And we have been also providing extra duty pay for teachers to work on content for remote. So we're not expecting each teacher to develop everything that they need. We're going to continue that into the fall and winter of next year as well. We've already have that in the budget.
To provide an opportunity for parents to ask questions to the extent they want to understand a bit more about the remote option or the virtual option. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same as it is right now. If it's going to be any different, perhaps we need an opportunity for parents to kind of have an opportunity to get those questions in prior to having to make a decision April 12th. Just wondering if you've considered that.
Yeah, it's really, we will definitely have communications with our families. Right now, we just wanted to even see who's even thinking about remote. I mean, it's going to make a significant difference how many of our families will be remote versus want to be in person. So once we have that information, we will definitely have some parent nights and make sure we're getting information to parents before they have to make that final decision. Yeah. And right now, what we are telling parents is if they are kind of going back and forth between in-person and remote and aren't really sure, they can just stay in person right now. It's much easier for us to move a student from in-person schedule to a remote schedule than it is to go from remote to in-person.
have a question.
Ms. Fox?
I did not hear you talk about the hybrid option. Are you thinking about that, or you're just not going to have a hybrid option or a blended option?
We're planning right now, so we're planning right now for 5 full days of in-person instruction. And then we also have the fully remote, and then we have the virtual learning path, which is self-paced. Now, so in the remote option, though, there may be some courses that would have to be in person, right? So if I'm in band or orchestra, I may come in for those courses. And so that's why we just need to get a handle on where the community, where our parents are with thinking about this. And then we can start to move that forward and have communication with our families. But right now we're planning for the 5 full days. Now, we will watch and monitor what our friend COVID brings to us in the fall, and that could, certainly change some of that. But right now, that's what we're planning for. We already have systems to be able to go into hybrid, let's say, if we were going to do more of an A/B schedule.
Mrs. Heinrich?
Just 2 quick questions. One, the students that follow the virtual self-paced, are they still receiving a Farmington Public Schools diploma? And so they're still graduating from our school district. And 2, the parents that choose the virtual option for their students, are they able to participate in extracurricular activities, clubs or sports and other things that the in-person students can, even though they're...
We do have Farmington teachers that are assigned to students as mentors. So they are connected to their school through that as well. Another question, or wanted me to clarify something?
I asked the question about the hybrid option, and I asked it because I'd like to know if, with the COVID that is raging right now in Michigan, do you have a plan for moving from one to the other? So that if we have to go through, if it gets to that point, can you pivot from one way of learning to another way? And that's why I kind of asked about the hybrid.
Yes, so for the fall, right? So we do know now how to schedule this and to be able to pivot. So whatever that would be, whatever, it would be calling for, because the purpose of a hybrid is to obviously lessen the density of the number of students, and at the elementary to maintain a cohort. So yes, we will have those plans, but right now we're doing all of the work to make sure we have a full schedule, and then we will adapt as the summer kind of directs us. Fingers crossed that we'll be able to keep this moving, but definitely we'll have a plan to be able to pivot. We can easily pivot back a whole class to virtual right now. So we already have those technologies to be able to do that. And so we would just want to make sure that we were clear in communicating what maybe an A/B day, week would look like at a high school, and then what would our elementary follow the same A/B. So those will be the things that we'll work through. Absolutely.
Are there any more questions before we move? Dr. Blau?
I share your concern, Ms. Fox, around trying to circumvent the challenges that we face this year as we try to move from fully remote back into, or even hybrid into more in person. So I'm glad to hear that you are already thinking ahead to how we might transition back and forth between those different modes of learning if conditions, demand.
And we are in a much better position as a system to be able to do that than we were even in January. So we've learned so much. As I said, we've purchased technology that helps support this. So the pivot will be a much smoother transition for our staff. Again, what we watch. I think that one of the other pieces that I want to make sure the board is aware of is right now, Dr. Goodrum meets with the Oakland County Health Division weekly. We internally have a wellness committee that's been meeting twice a week over the last 3 or 4 weeks. We are constantly monitoring our data. And one of the things that the Oakland County Health Division has been very clear on is that we need to watch school spread. So we recognize that there's other metrics out in our community, but it is the school spread that has been the cause for some of our schools to have to shut down. So I just want to make sure the board knows we're watching this on a daily basis. We come together twice a week at least, or more as needed. We have another meeting. We're meeting again on Thursday morning to continue to talk about this. And as I said, Dr. Goodrum is connected to Oakland Health Division each week, and we follow their guidance. So I just want you to know that if there comes something that is alarming to us, you will know, and we will be making changes that we see necessary based on school spread. Right now, we've had quarantines, we've had to quarantine classrooms, but we have yet to have school spread in a way that it's that we can even connect it to school. Mostly these have all been different community coming together. And then we knew this, and we did share this with our community, that there would be more quarantines because we would have more students. I think the other thing it's important for the board to know is we are jumping in now to our state standardized testing. So our PSAT, our SAT, and our M-STEP. We will have less students in the building during those testing cycles. So we are already going to be having less of our students in our building moving forward over the next couple of weeks. So just a few things for the board to know, that what we are watching to make sure that we're doing the best we can to keep everybody safe. We are continuing to work on our contact tracing efforts. We talk daily with our nurse, and the Oakland Health Division nurses are there to support. So again, just an overview for the board so you have an idea of what we're doing internally.
Mr. Walker, and then Mrs. Heinrich.
Yes, one of the challenges during this year with dealing with COVID was the technical logistics, making sure students had the technology at home to be able to continue their learning. As we make a plan for full face-to-face in the fall, and also in thinking about that, hopefully we don't have to do it, but the possibility of a pivot, what are the plans for deploying technology for our students? Is that something maybe we walk into the year and they already have available to them, so that in the event of a pivot, that's one less thing to think about? Or is there some other kind of consideration taking place for that kind of deployment?
So we do meet weekly as an instructional services department and IT together to talk about everything technology and instruction. And we are currently making our plans, because one of the things we have to do is receive devices back in, do some updates on them before we send them back out. So we are having conversations about, one, we want to make sure students have devices for summer school, for all of those that are engaged in those pieces, but we also want to make sure we do the refreshes we need on the devices that are just necessary, that you do every summer as part of a technology plan. So we will be talking about how will we assign devices and make those one-to-one connections with kids with devices in the event that we have to transition. But what we're also seeing is an increased use of technology in person with Canvas and Padlet and Flipgrid and all those things that we've provided to students. So we don't envision less technology needed just in the classroom. So that is part of our planning for next year, though, is how are we going to do device use? So we've been actively talking with technology on that.
Yeah. And if I could just add on to that, Mr. Walker, we did purchase new laptops for all of our teaching staff. So those Chromebooks then became available now for students, so that we would have enough for replacements, or if somebody comes to school and theirs isn't charged, we would have some already ready for them. So we've been working on that and building up technology so that we're able to support that.
Yes, I just want to thank you for just recognize the tremendous job you're doing. We talked about summer plans, and it's just a tremendous amount of planning. Talking about next year's scheduling, a tremendous amount of planning, and now talking about right now and how is it going, and the week after spring break. And I just wanted to know if you could just give a little bit more detail, I guess, to our community, those daily COVID reports that come out, how that, and you did address that you're meeting and you're, looking for spread within the school as opposed to outside. But maybe can you just explain maybe a little bit more when a parent receives a COVID report, there's been one student at STEAM Academy. How did that happen? Did the parents call up and say, oh, I just wanted to let you know that my child is absent, and the reason that they're absent is they tested positive? And, how is that working with the community? Is it the partnership? And then how do you know it was outside or not in the school? And just a little bit more information on that.
Yes, absolutely. So I wouldn't say there's one path for us to find these things out, but I think it's important to remember each student who walks in our door has a piece of paper, and that says that they have been screened at home. If they do not have that piece of paper, then they are screened in the office before they would go anywhere. If a student comes down to the office, and this is K-12, pre-K through 12, if they come down to the office and they have any type of symptom, they are sent home. That goes on a spreadsheet that is reviewed constantly by our nursing staff. So then the nursing staff contacts the families to find out, how is your child doing? Are they feeling okay? And then they go through all of that to figure out if this is, if they should stay home, if they need, if they need to stay quarantined, right? So it's a multi-layered approach, but at the end, it's our health professionals who are communicating with families. Sometimes a parent will call in, they don't send their child to school, and they'll say, hey, we had somebody in our family test positive, so then they keep their children home, and then we track that. So there's a tracking process for our staff, there's a tracking process for our students. Each building, every time a student is sent home or comes down with symptoms, there's a process. So if they have allergies, we need something from the doctor before they can come back. So it's a pretty I think tedious might not be the right word, but a very intense process that we go through with each child who has at one symptom at all. And so then all the decisions about quarantining or isolating are made by our nurses in our district. So there's a multiple of ways. Now that we are testing athletes, that's another way that we may find that. So there's a lot of different ways, but we track every person internally to make sure that we are identifying, and that's how we find out if it's a school spread or not. And if it's not, it's because they've had other contact with somebody at home. So, we've had over break, we've had people report. So that's why we got letters over break.
And it sounds like a much more rigorous process than a student was absent in a normal year. But you're testing the athletes by the school staff is testing, but you're not doing any other testing in the schools. Is that correct?
Correct. And that's just once a week.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith.
How did we, as a district, decide not to do what other districts did? Due to the fact that Oakland County has high numbers, whereas other districts, we were told, took this week off, and then some took another additional week off. So could you explain to the community why we didn't shut down? Because that's the $1 million question right now. If I could get $1 million for each time we were asked this, we would all be able to walk away from here. So could you explain that to the community as well as to the board? what was the decision and how that was made that we chose not to when other districts chose to do either 1 week or 2?
Yeah, thank you. So many of most of the districts in Oakland County did remain open. So there is a handful, as you're mentioning, that had that pre-scheduled to do that. The wellness team met twice, I think at least, or 3 times over break to have these conversations. And again, Dr. Goodrum reminded us of the Oakland County Health Division's guidance that if we don't have school spread, then we are safe to be back in session. Some of those other schools were more worried about school spread than we have been. We just don't have the data to show that we have school spread that require us to stay remote or to stay out of school. So we had several teachers ask about that. They understood, you know, we are fortunate to have many of our staff now in the vaccination process. So we're happy about that. And we just decided that we would keep this, you know, our quarantining, we may have to quarantine a classroom, but we really wanted to continue to have that opportunity for our students to come in person and learn. Parents always, and we have many parents who have decided to keep their students home, and we're supporting them virtually.
Mrs. Heinrich.
Just because you mentioned if you have to quarantine a classroom, just can you address what support that the students in that classroom are going to get? If the parents get a notice saying your child's class is quarantined for the next 5 days, what kind of support can they expect for their child while they're home quarantined?
So if we quarantine the whole class, that is the teacher as well. So the teacher would teach them virtually. We have some other, and again, that's what we're finding, at least at the elementary. At the secondary, it's a little bit different. But what we do, it's a case-by-case basis, and we offer them opportunities to either jump into a virtual class, stream in with the teacher. I mean, it really is, the teachers just work with their students on that at the secondary level. So we've had a lot of different options, but we do make sure our students are connected and have the work that they would need during that quarantine period. But we've had 2 cases where we've quarantined the classroom because there was a majority of them that would have had to be quarantined. And so that way the teacher is home, or the teacher is quarantined as well and is teaching virtually to the entire class.
And if we also recall, if I can add, Dr. Coffin, that the way the secondary schedule is set up, Friday mornings are virtual for all students, and in the afternoon, or did I miss that? I forgot. We're doing support in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Asynchronous support.
Asynchronous
support. Check-in and support in the morning.
Yeah, that check-in support in the morning allows virtually for students who are quarantined to make sure they have their time with their teacher. Yeah, it's that morning time. Sorry.
For answering the board's questions. We appreciate you returning to that topic. We'll now move to item number 8, public comment. Mrs. Buckley, do we have any public comment? I'm going to call for public comment 2 more times. We have no public comment. There is no one calling in for public comment. Public comment is now closed. Thank you very much, Mrs. Buckley. We will now move on to action items. The first is the approval of the auditor appointment. Do we have a motion? Mrs. Heinrich?
Yes. The auditor appointment was reviewed at the March 23rd, 2021 board meeting. I move that the Board of Education appoint Plant Moran, PLLC, to perform the 2020-2021 financial audit of district funds as outlined in the March 16th, 2021 memo from Kim Pinchek.
Support.
A motion was made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Mrs. Smith, to appoint Plant Moran to perform the 2021 financial audit of district funds. Is there any discussion? Before moving to a roll call vote, I would just mention that we did have a discussion at our last meeting about auditor rotation. So there is a little bit of concern that I heard expressed by board members about how long we keep a certain auditor. As a former auditor and a CPA, I know that there are rules, strict rules around rotation, partner rotation. There are some countries actually that require an entire firm to be rotated. The United States considered that several years ago and decided not to move in that direction. I will tell you that our audit firm regularly rotates staff. We have a new audit partner, I believe, this year. She's been on the engagement before, but she is a different partner. The old partner has rotated off. So you generally get people sprinkled in. The concern is that if you have too close a relationship that you may not get the findings that you would if you got a new auditor. Getting a new auditor is a painful process, I will tell you. In the first or second year, and then it gets easier and easier. That's not a reason not to switch auditors, but I did want to address questions that board members might have about the continuity. Any other discussion?
No, and I just want to thank you for clarifying that, because I did ask, I noticed Plant Moran did a lot of work for the district, and you just clarified that the auditors are separate, and that's separate from the members that actually do the work for the district.
Yes, and then the other thing, thank you for reminding me, the other piece of this is not just the auditor rotation. So are we getting folks that are so used to us that they don't, do a thorough review? The other piece of this is about conflicts of interest. So there are some occasions where the same firm might do more work for the district outside of the audit. And so the question is there a conflict of interest there? There are lots and lots of rules around that too. So the rules provide that a certain firm, if they're doing your audit, are prohibited from performing a laundry list of other services for you. There are services that can be provided, and again, that's monitored, and there are lots of rules around that. So as an example, if I were the auditor for the district, I could not provide accounting services. Why? Because I would be auditing accounting services. So I can't develop the services and then turn around and audit them. So I just wanted to let the board know that there are lots of rules around this, and I don't feel uncomfortable with the rotation piece of it. Okay? So now that we've had discussion, Mr. Walker, can we have a roll call vote?
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Ms. Heinrich?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Myself am yes, and Ms. Williams.
I'm a yes.
It is unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Moving now to the second action item, the closed session minutes. Mrs. Heinrich?
I move, the closed session was from the last board meeting. I move that the Board of Education approve the March 23rd, 2021 closed session minutes as presented.
Support.
Motion made by Mrs. Heinrich to approve the March 23rd closed session minutes, supported by Mr. Walker.
Just one quick thing, just for discussion on it. In the current minutes, it does say that the next closed session for the purpose of collective bargaining strategy will be held on April 6th, 2021 at 4:30 p.m. And while that was the case at the time of the minutes being created and at the time of that past meeting, that session was canceled for tonight. So that is just a explanation of that.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Are you suggesting that we amend the minutes?
Yes, to, let's see. Correct, yeah, so I think it's set and it's good as is, but it is just a note
Yep.
on it, is that was the case at the time of the minutes, but that meeting did not end up happening tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. So noted. I don't think that we need to change the minutes because I think that was the case at the time, but I appreciate you noting that.
Sure.
Thank you. We ready to vote? All in favor on the closed session minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Great, the motion passes. We can now move to the consent agenda. Mr. Rich.
I move that the Board of Education approve the April 6th, 2021 consent agenda as follows. A, approval of minutes. That's for 1, March 23rd, 2021, special meeting. 2, March 23rd, 2021, regular meeting. And 3, March 27th, 2021, board workshop.
Support.
Motion made by Mr. Rich, supported by Ms. Smith to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, are there any reports from board representatives? Seeing none, we will move on to recommendations for future agenda items. Are there any recommendations for future agenda items? Seeing none, we will move to good and welfare. Is there any good and welfare? Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. It weighs heavy on this district's heart. On Thursday, March 25th at 3 p.m., the clouds parted for a fallen falcon to make his transition to be with many of his predecessors. Mike Randall, a quiet man that spoke volumes through his love of music and the students he believed in when no one else did. Mike saw souls and made a difference. Mike Randall graduated in 1972 from Farmington High School. He entered the University of Michigan School of Music to study music education. Mike returned to Farmington High School in 1975 to begin work with the Falcon Drumline. Work would continue until 2017. You would see Mike walking through good weather and even bad to make sure he was the outstanding instructor he was to do the following in our district. These are only a few varieties of positions held for over his past 45 years of instruction in our community. He influenced many, including my own youngest daughter and Mr. Walker's bonus child as well, who still drums today. Farmington High School drum instructor was one of his positions, and these are as follows. Farmington High School assistant marching band instructor under the great leadership of Mike Steele, Farmington High School assistant marching band director, Farmington High School front ensemble director, Farmington High School symphony band, concert winds, and concert band's percussion instructor, Farmington FOOP, Harrison High School drumline instructor, Plymouth Fife and Drum Corps, Harrison High School assistant marching band director, and private lessons to many. Mike took pride during halftime at homecoming games, playing not only as a former student, but with those that were under his leadership. Mike's former students have not only continued to drum either privately at college, but at halftimes, at the Lions games, and even come back and perform with him as an alumni. But now even working at Farmington High School, students such as Zach and Hunter Desjardins are working currently for Farmington Public Schools. They were a family, having meals with him in our homes, at Ram's Horn on Saturday mornings before competitions, to even eating his baked goods. Mike's former students have shared their memories through calls, drumming, social media, and remembering his odd way of saying happy birthday to each and every one of them through Facebook. He remembered them all. The appreciation of him is still being posted. They were profoundly influenced by this great man and his work ethic. As a matter of fact, Mike worked with Mike Steele to help Michelle Jakacki celebrate her birthday. Her dream was to have a drum line, and we all went to Plymouth Canton to that recognition to celebrate her. His high standards, his commitment to music and musicianship, and yes, his humor, mainly at band camp. Mike's nearly half-century of instruction to our Farmington Public Schools students took them to new heights, creating strong musicians and strong people. We will all feel his recent passing deeply in our Farmington Public Schools community. Soon, when we are all able to go to opening day parades or even to the parades that we've had and we've all enjoyed, we will, in general, look up and say, "Make it fly, Falcon." And thank you for all the work you have done for over the past 45 years, Mike Randall, for your service. Make it fly. He leaves to mourn his former students, Farmington Marching Band and Drumline, parents, Norm Logan, Grant Hemke, Brad Moore, and Mike Steele. Thank you for your service.
Mrs. Fox.
I just would like to echo what Angie Smith has talked about in terms of Mr. Randall. My son graduated from Farmington High School in 2017. He played the trumpet during the music programs. He also was on the marching band. And I, too, was on the music patron board. And we were a family. We still are. As soon as the word got out that Mr. Randall had passed, a number of students contacted my son a few days ago to let him know. We're still a family at Farmington Marching Band. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
I just wanted to share and say thank you, Ms. Smith, for that wonderful, wonderful tribute to Mr. Randall. My son did play in the pit and marching band for 4 years, and as parents, we were concerned about his transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. But when he connected with band, matter of fact, it was in the auditorium when the band came marching in, and he looked up, and I never saw such wide eyes on him before. He was immediately enraptured by it. And when he connected with Mr. Randall and the other members of the pit, he found a home long before his sister, when her turn came to go to Farmington. We were more concerned about him than her, and it was actually the other way around, because he found that home and that family with the band and with Mr. Randall. And when he found out that Mr. Randall had passed, he's not one to show an awful lot of emotion, but on that day he certainly did. And so just wanted to say thank you to him, his family, to the band family of Farmington, for all that they do for the children who come through that program.
Thank you all for sharing those warm thoughts for a member of our Farmington family. We offer our condolences. Mr. Walker?
Yes. And I'd also like to acknowledge Ms. Angie Smith for the contribution she continues to make to this board and to this community, because she's been a member of this community for so many years and has been a part of this community in such a deeply entrenched way that some of us who aren't as connected or still new or may not have been a part of the community on that level, we might have missed something as important as this. So I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Smith and thank her for her past service, her continued service, and the way she continues to bring this institutional history of Farmington and Farmington Hills to the work that we're doing now and the work that we will continue to do. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mrs. Smith?
Thank you all. This has been a very emotional moment for all of us in this community. We are fighting a pandemic, and we take it for granted that we have these teachers that are going over and beyond, and they love our children. I'm going to get a little personal, if I may. During that time that my daughter started Farmington High School, she was the youngest. My 2 older daughters had gone through this district. And as Mr. Walker and Ms. Fox has said, when those kids walk into an auditorium for orientation, the first thing they see is that marching band or that dance group. Yes. And the choir, and Ms. Weems can attest to that with her daughters being singers and dancers. They become family. My daughter was a violinist, and she had never touched a drum a day in her life. And Mr. Randall saw something in her that no one else saw. She didn't have a drum set, but she had my dashboard of my convertible, and she used that dashboard. And my daughter was the first minority girl to make drumline in 9th grade. You usually start out in pit, but she started out and she played a drum, and Mr. Randall's chest stuck out. This was a very quiet, humble man. Yes. And he was loved. And I don't think he really realized how much this community loves him. But on that note, I want to say thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. Because as soon as I got the word and I called them, the first person I talked to was Terry Weems, and she said, absolutely, we have to give him this tribute. Mr. Randall didn't want a service because he was a humble man. But I felt that we needed to give him that eulogy to let him know that he is loved. He has 2 students right now that they do have time for the Lions. And so with that being said, we've got to acknowledge our staff. This man didn't see color. I know people get mad when people say that. He saw souls. He saw people, he saw children, he saw kids that were struggling, that were going through things, and he didn't make a difference. So on that note, I thank each and every, and thank you, Mr. Walker. You know, being a member of this community for 23 years, I acknowledge and love the fact that all of you have been dedicated in this community. I will say that. Because you have either served as PTA or teachers or even parents. And Zach Rich growing up here as a young man, and then coming back and serving his community, which we don't get paid to take the criticism and all of everything that we go through. But me as a board member, I've also worked in these schools. So when I go into a school, I don't go to see the principal. I go see the lunch lady, I go see the custodian, and I go see the Mike Randalls. And again, I want to thank each and every one, not only the Mike Randalls and the Mike Steels and all the teachers, and yes, the Brenda Goldsloans, but I want to thank my colleagues for listening, taking the time to say, oh, she's just making this up. They know that I know what I'm talking about. So thank you for the support, and thank you for allowing me to give homage to a man that deserved this. I mean, he left our community as a student and he came back, and he served until he got sick in 2017. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more good in welfare?
I just want to really thank Mrs. Smith for her comments and the warm thoughts, and just sharing the importance of the community. And as young parents, I've lived in this community for lots of years, and as young parents, we got some of those tag day tickets and took our children to the concert at Farmington High School and said to our oldest daughter, when you go to high school, you can join the band. And so I was a parent of a band kid, and Mr. Randall was under Mr. Logan at that time. And so I just want to echo, it is really a caring community, and just a really important part of our school district that we have such long-serving, dedicated, and families really recognize the service and the importance of having a good school district that I'm really happy to be a part of serving now and getting to work with the school board. And thank you for that.
Thank you all. I am very proud to be part of this board. On that note, we are adjourned.